Welcome to the Edgar Davis channel. Today, I would like to introduce you to the story, The Cross Files, Season 1. By Bard of Prey. Read by Edgar Davis. Episode 1, Pilot. The Cross Files. The truth is out there. Blessed are ye, when men shall revile you, and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely, for my sake. Rejoice, and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Matthew 5:11-12. Galilee straightened her suit coat, reminding herself of her purpose here today. The bureau was unhappy with her work. What had they called it? Proselytizing. Apparently talking about her religion was strictly forbidden by the higher-ups in the FBI. She loved her job. She loved the mystery, the suspense, the feeling of fulfillment. She didn't want to lose it. Then again, she loved God more. If he chose to lead her in a different direction, she would follow unquestioningly. Agent Gilchrist, please have a seat. Assistant Director Baxter greeted with a cordial smile. He was an actor beyond compare. The man could mold his personality to fit the occasion. Today, the deceiver was adopting a sickeningly sweet, condescending tone. I would rather stand if that's all right, sir. She answered simply. A.D. Baxter looked a little surprised by her refusal but shrugged it off. He sat back against his desk, arms casually crossed. We've had another complaint, Gilchrist. This is the 6th one in a month. I can't overlook it. I wouldn't want you to, sir. These people have been through quite an ordeal. You're supposed to be helping them, not filling their heads with this religious garbage. It isn't garbage. Galilee was getting angry now. It is because of those ordeals that they need God. He's the only one who can ease their grief. Agent, I have warned you time and again about this. You're harassing these people. Now, I told you the last time we had this discussion that if you were caught proselytizing again that you would be put on suspension. I am afraid that I will have to carry through with that threat. Such behavior is not acceptable at the FBI. Galilee's brown eyes flashed. Don't bother, sir. She tore the ID from her suit jacket and threw it at the man. I quit. She slammed her badge and gun on the desk before storming out of the room. As she made her way to the parking garage, she began to doubt her decision. What was she going to do now? She'd spent years working for the FBI. What else could she possibly do for a living? With a sigh of frustration, Galilee unlocked the door of her Chevrolet Cavalier and slid into the driver's seat. God held her. He knew what was in store for her future. She was secure in that. She just needed someone to remind her of that truth upon occasion. As she slipped the key into the ignition, her eye caught sight of something rectangular and white laying on the dashboard. Cautiously, she picked it up. It was a note. What's more, it was a note she didn't remember placing on her dashboard. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the small piece of paper and held it under the light. You have passed a test of faith, sister. Rejoice and be glad. Your reward for service to your king shall be far greater than you imagine. Fear not for your future, it is in the Lord's able hands. He, as I, watch you even now. Malak. Galilee's eyes doubled in size. Someone had broken into her car for the express purpose of leaving a strange note on her dashboard. The writer had known about her resignation, knew about her fears, and claimed to be watching her even now. She swiveled in her seat, trying to observe anyone in the parking garage who seemed out of place. There was no one there. Empty. Although she was still shaken by the idea of someone following her home, she really had no choice in the matter. It had probably been a practical joke, anyway. One of the other agents was going for one last goodbye. Her faith had provided nothing but amusement to many of her co-workers since she'd been officially accepted into the FBI nearly 3 years before. This was just their way of saying they'd miss her. Galilee turned the key in the ignition and began the weary drive home. Unseen by the former FBI agent, another car pulled out onto the road from the visitors' parking area. It picked up a position nearly 3 car lengths behind the Cavalier and followed her until she was roughly a mile from her apartment complex. There, The driver pulled out his cell phone and hit speed dial. "Sir, mission accomplished." She responded to the note the way you said she would. She should be home in 3 minutes. Are we continuing with the plan as scheduled? Yes, sir, I understand. I will do my best to keep her safe. But, it may be a full-time job. I don't think the enemy is going to let us have this one quietly. He's planning something big this time. A full-scale attack. The wicked one's out there, sir. I can smell him. Since the fall of the Angel of Light, there has been an ongoing battle between good and evil raging in our world. We are not the warriors in this battle, but the prize. Each and every day our souls are pulled both in the direction of God and the direction of Satan. It is ultimately our decision as to where and how we proceed. But, we are not helpless in this war. Through the sacrifice of Jesus, we are given the power to overcome the legions of Satan, and his legions are everywhere. We are a small, but powerful organization created to aid humanity in the war against Satan. Our directive is clear: defy the wicked one through our testimony and the power of our faith. Our adventures are strange ones, wrought with what some might call paranormal activity. However, we know better. There is nothing supernatural about Satan, or the Cross Files. The moment Galilee turned the corner onto her street, she knew something was wrong. 2 black cars were parked on the opposite side of the road facing the colossal colonial house which had been divided into 6 apartments by a construction crew nearly 10 years ago. They were new to this area. She'd never seen them before. Furthermore, she recognized the make, model, and condition to be that of a government-issue vehicle. Unmarked. Not good at all. Warily, she parked her Cavalier. Had this something to do with the note she'd received? Perhaps she had a stalker. Or worse, maybe one of the criminals she'd put behind bars had escaped or been released. Perhaps she was even now under the watchful eye of a man bent on her destruction. A shiver passed the length of her spine as she emerged from her vehicle. Almost immediately, 2 men grabbed her arms and pulled her into the alley behind the building. "Miss Gilchrist?" Galilee shifted in their iron grip to face the man who'd spoken. He was large, dressed entirely in black with a pair of sunglasses acting as a barrier between her gaze and his own. She didn't like to speak to someone when she couldn't see their eyes. "If you wanted to talk to me, sir, I would have been more than happy to invite you up to my apartment. Theatrics like this are unnecessary. Have they contacted you yet, Miss Gilchrist?" The man prodded, his voice monotonous and void of emotion. Galilee sighed. "They? I'm afraid I don't know to whom you are referring. Now, would you kindly let me go?" She jerked her left arm free only to have it snatched up again. "What is going on? You have no right to hold me here like this. I demand to know with what I am being charged. We know they are watching you. They want you." "They?" She gave them both a quizzical look and sighed. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who are they?" She couldn't make out what the man was doing behind his large sunglasses, although it felt as if he were trying to stare into her very soul. Content with what they saw there, the men dropped her arms and stepped out of the alleyway. Galilee took a moment to regain her bearings before she ran after them. "Wait a minute. You didn't answer my question." "What the?" They were gone. She had only given them a 60-second head start, and they had vanished. Curiouser and curiouser. She murmured as she unlocked the building door and started up the stairs to her apartment. "Miss Gilchrist?" Galilee froze. There were 4 men seated on the chairs in the building's foyer. From the looks of things, they'd been waiting for her. "Listen, if you're going to ask me if they have contacted me, or try to scare me with some nonsense about being watched, forget it. I'm not buying any. I've had a very bad day. I just want to go upstairs to my apartment and veg out in front of TV Land reruns. Is that so much to ask?" The men looked at each other with bewilderment. Finally, one of them stood to introduce himself. He couldn't have been many years older than Galilee herself. He stood just above 6 feet with sandy blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, and a physique that subtly advertised a daily workout routine. Galilee found herself pushing away thoughts she shouldn't have been having. Still, the man was attractive. "Miss Gilchrist, I'm Jordan Thomas with the United Nations. I've been asked to accompany these gentlemen as they discuss a matter of some importance with you. Is it all right if we speak in your apartment? Galilee's senses were immediately on alert. Why was he here? Yes, of course. Please follow me. She didn't turn around to look back as she led them up the stairs and down a short hallway to her part of the building. She gestured them inside and waited until they were seated before she ensconced herself in an overstuffed armchair facing the room. I assume this visit has something to do with my parents. It was a statement, not a question. She could feel the fear building in the pit of her stomach. Please God, don't let this be about my parents. Let them be all right. Jordan glanced down at his shoes and nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am, I'm afraid it is. Your parents were recently dispatched to a remote tribe in the Western African Republic's Savannah region, correct? Yes, my parents are missionaries. Their most recent project was a primitive tribe who has had little contact with the outside world. Others have speculated that they might still be practicing cannibalism. The fear had built until it was almost overpowering her. Miss Gilchrist. One of the other men joined the conversation haltingly. We have reason to believe that your parents' testimony was not received well by the tribesmen. Not received well? Her face paled. They're dead, aren't they? The man nodded but did not elaborate. It was that bad. Galilee sat a little straighter, staunching her emotions. What happened? You really don't want to know, ma'am. The second man added his 2 cents. It's awfully gruesome. Was an FBI agent. I can handle gruesome. Now, tell me what happened. Galilee ordered in a firm tone. God, give me the strength to hear this through. Please. I have to hear it if I'm ever going to sleep in peace again. The third and final man leaned forward in his seat, placing his forearms on his legs as he spoke. Your parents were apparently seen as demon worshippers by the tribesmen. They were told to leave and denounce their God. When they didn't, they were taken prisoner. The man paused, trying to decide if he should continue. Galilee's frown urged him on. By the looks of things, they were tortured for several weeks. They were denied food and water, given minimal amounts of sleep, and subjected to physical traumas such as cuts, burns, and beatings in an attempt to make them forsake their faith. When that didn't work, they were offered as a sacrifice to the tribal gods to make amends for their blasphemy. Parts of their bodies were later consumed as part of that ceremony. Galilee could actually feel her heart break. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw herself off the nearest mountain and plummet to her death on the sharp rocks below. But, she would do none of these things. They would never betray Christ. God would have given them the strength to overcome any physical ordeal with which they came in contact. They couldn't have asked for a more noble death. They died in His service. I'm sure He's already rewarded them. Thank you for telling me. You can leave now. I'll be fine. 3 of the men seemed more than happy to exit the apartment as quickly as they could. Such news was never easy to deliver, and this woman's reaction had been atypical to say the least. The door closed behind them. One man had stayed behind. Jordan remained on the sofa with a perplexed frown. You don't blame them, do you? The men who killed your parents, you aren't upset with them? Galilee looked up, surprised at his presence. I don't blame them, no. They didn't know what they were doing. They were instruments in a much larger war. I pity them more than I blame them, but I won't lie to you. I do feel anger for their actions. I'm only human. She sat back against the couch, closing her eyes and trying to block out the doubts threatening her faith. My parents knew what they were getting into. They've always been ridiculed for their religion. It seems almost fitting that they die as they lived, strong in their faith despite the opinions of others. Jordan's head cocked to the side. What do you mean? My parents were born Jews. My father was American, my mother was Israeli. They met on a kibbutz when they were 18 and fell in love. My father married her and started at a university in Jerusalem in the hopes of one day becoming a rabbi. It was almost exactly 2 months after their wedding day, when my father was driving home from class, that everything changed. Galilee's lips curled up in a smile as she recalled the story her father had told her so many times. It was a bittersweet smile, for her would never tell her this story again. Josiah steadied his hands on the steering wheel and stared at the dirty road winding out before him. This wasn't the sort of road he'd grown accustomed to in America. "Face it, Josh, you were spoiled." Then, he saw it. A flash out of the corner of his eye followed by the ear-piercing screech of metal being twisted into a prison of steel and machinery. His heart stopped beating. A car accident. He easily maneuvered his vehicle to the side of the road. When he exited, his eyes were met with a terrifying sight. A rental car lying on its roof in a ditch yards from the road. Without thinking, he raced off down the hill to the car, just as it burst into a wall of flames. Josiah Yahudi stopped beside the vehicle, turning around to see if anyone else had come to help him. No one. The other cars were driving by as if nothing had happened. With his heart in his throat, Josiah kicked in the windshield and dove in the car, past the fire. He could hear crying and what sounded like praying. Later, Josh would claim that he was unaware of exactly what he did in the next few moments. He did not clearly remember dragging the four-member American family from their car onto the safety of the ground several yards away. He didn't remember the automobile exploding as he carried the 6-year-old girl to her parents. He couldn't recall throwing her to the ground and covering her body with his own, a move which resulted in third-degree burns over most of his back. Thankfully, someone had called an ambulance to take the now 5 injured victims to the hospital. Josiah passed out in the ambulance and did not wake up again for 22 hours. The first thing of which he was aware when he woke was an almost silent sobbing. He turned his head and opened his eyes to gaze fully upon his beautiful bride. Shoshana was hugging herself and rocking slowly as she whispered a prayer in Hebrew and cried, "My flower, I'm fine, just a little worse for wear." Shoshana looked up from her prayer with wide brown eyes. "Josh, I knew I wasn't going to lose you. I knew Hashem wouldn't take you from me." Josh laughed at his wife's ever-constant faith. It was easy to see that her father had been a prominent rabbi through most of her childhood. "How are the others?" Shoshana averted her gaze. "The mother and 2 children are fine, Josiah, but the father was apparently killed on impact." "I'm sorry, honey." He felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Those children would now be forced to live without a father. "Good morning, Mr. Yahudi." The voice from the door surprised him. He could only maneuver a little without hurting his injured back, but he recognized the woman anyway. "My name is Cynthia Cooper, and it would seem that I owe you a debt of gratitude. You saved me and my children, Mr. Yahudi." She might have been beautiful had she not been covered in small lacerations, bound like a mummy, and seated in a rusty wheelchair. Nevertheless, she rolled herself up to his bed on the opposite side of Shoshana. "I would like to repay that debt if I could." Josiah shook his head. "No, ma'am. You don't owe me anything. I failed you. If I'd reacted sooner, Mr. Yahudi, everything happens for a reason. Even death. I don't pretend to know why all the terrible things in this would have to occur, but I do know that God's reason is a good one." She paused, watching his expression carefully. "Mr. Yahudi, I believe that the reason my family suffered such a horrific car accident, the reason my husband died, revolves almost entirely around you." "Me?" Josiah sounded a bit skeptical. He knew where this was going. "You gave us back our lives, Mr. Yahudi. I would very much like to give you back your soul." She held up her hand at the horrified look on Shoshana's face. Cynthia apparently knew that the name Jesus Christ was blasphemy to many Orthodox Jews. "Please, I do not mean to offend either one of you. I simply ask that you hear me through before you write me off as a religious zealot." Josh reached across the bed to take his wife's hand. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Please, go on." His parents had raised him to be polite regardless of the situation. Besides, in the back of his mind he was intrigued by this woman's faith. Her husband had just died, leaving her to raise 2 young children on her own. And yet, she was taking the time to witness to him about her belief in Christ. Whether he agreed with this woman or not, he had to admit that any religion with such devout followers was worth at least 10 minutes of his time. It took more than 10 minutes. It would be 2 hours before Cynthia finally finished telling Josiah and Shoshana about salvation. She could see the slightest glimmer of interest in their young eyes. I believe that God has taken a terrible tragedy and turned it into an event to glorify Him, she concluded, laying a book on the table beside Josiah's bed. I'm giving you my Bible, Mr. Yahudi. Please just read the New Testament and give Christ a chance. I assure you, you will not regret it. By the time my father recovered from his injuries, he'd read the New Testament 7 times, once aloud to my mother. They were both saved and converted to Christianity at a high price. My grandparents said Kaddish over their souls and proclaimed them dead for their blasphemy. There was nothing left. My parents moved to America, changed their last names to echo their Christian faith instead of their Jewish ethnicity, and then enrolled at a seminary school to become missionaries. My father's dream was to lead other people to salvation in the same way that he had been led. Galilee concluded in a soft voice, tinged with the emotion of the day. Jordan's shock was evident. His handsome face was a mirror of amazement. That's quite a story. So, then, your accent. Galilee laughed. A combination of influences. I was born in Chicago. My father was an American from Tennessee, my mother was Israeli, and I grew up in various countries in Africa where my parents were ministering at the time. Most speech pathologists have a hard time pinpointing my exact place of origin. I can drop it if it annoys you, she offered. No. He flushed slightly and laughed. I mean, no. It's beautiful. I've never heard anything quite like it. It was Galilee's turn to blush. So, you don't blame God for any of this? Shouldn't He have protected them? He did protect them, just not the way you or I would think of protection. He protected their souls and their faith. They didn't give in to the physical torture not because they were strong, but because Jesus was by their side holding their hands. They knew He was with them. He may not have protected their bodies from death, but that's all right. He saved their souls from damnation. Galilee stopped and frowned at the man sitting across from her. You're not a Christian, are you? She asked bluntly. Jordan looked away. Not really. I was never into that whole born-again thing. I just don't see how a loving God can allow the terrible things in this world to occur. It doesn't mesh. Well. Galilee picked up her purse and shuffled through the contents until she found a notepad. Carefully, she wrote a few things down and handed them across to the man. Here. That's my home and cell phone number. If you're ever in the mood to discuss your problems with Christ, you let me know. I spent my childhood dissuading doubts like yours. I'm not sure I'll have all the answers, but I'll certainly try to answer what I can. Please, feel free to call me anytime. Jordan's mouth dropped open. This woman had just learned her parents had died brutal deaths thousands of miles away, and here she was offering to give him answers to his doubts. She really was an amazing woman. Is that a polite way of telling me to leave? He asked with a grin. Galilee bit back a smile of her own. This man had a way of making her forget her troubles. Actually, yes. I'm horribly tired and my bad day just got worse. There was a tinge of sadness in that final comment. It made Jordan's heart ache. Just one last thing. What was all that stuff about being watched and not knowing who they were? I wish I knew, she declared with a heavy sigh. It was only after the man left her apartment that she unleashed the dam of her emotions. The tears began in a slow trickle that built into a terrifying tidal wave of sorrow. Galilee curled into a ball on her couch, hugging a pillow and laying her forehead against her Bible. God, just see me through this. Let me have the strength of faith that my parents had when they died in your great and glorious name. Let me make both them and you proud. Use this tragedy to glorify you. Please, Lord. I'm scared. I have no job, no source of income. Now, I have no family. You are my rock. you are my fortress. I need you to give me strength. Please, use this horrible day to build many wonderful days in the future. Please, just let me find my peace again. Her prayers continued long into the night. Outside of her apartment, parked in an unobtrusive SUV across the street, sat a man. He laid down his binoculars and radio microphone before he pressed the speed dial on his cell phone. "Hello, sir, our worst fears have been realized. The Wicked One has declared war on her parents. Killed while on a mission in Africa, surprisingly well. No, her faith is holding strong. She was a wise choice, sir. Do I act now or wait?" "Yes, sir, patience is a virtue. The Lord will let us know when the time is right to make first contact. Just do me one favor, sir, keep her in your prayers until this comes to a head. She's going to need them. I don't think Satan is going to give up on her this easily." Episode 2, The Good Fight. I called upon the Lord in distress, the Lord answered me, and set me in a large place. The Lord is on my side, I will not fear. What can man do unto me? The Lord taketh my part with them that help me, therefore shall I see my desire upon them that hate me. Psalm 118 5-7. Galilee had cried herself into a stupor over the death of her parents. It felt as if she was fighting a battle with herself. She wouldn't allow her faith in God to dwindle simply because Satan had taken her parents away. Although at the moment, God was the easiest one to blame. She rose from the couch, paying no attention to the VCR clock which glowed green with the time 3:13 a.m. She needed to feel close to her Creator. There was only one way for her to do that. She wrapped a jacket around her shoulders and left the sanctuary of her home through an alley entrance. Within moments, she was walking down the sidewalk in front of her apartment building. Galilee had grown up in Africa. The trees, the open sky, these were the things which made her feel close to God. After all, He created them. Tonight, she needed to feel close to her Father. The gentle night breeze caressed her cheeks with an almost loving touch. To Galilee, it was the equivalent of a heavenly hug. The burden of her sorrow slowly lifted from her heart. She shoved her hands into the pockets of her coat, humming a hymn as she walked. Unnoticed, a dark figure slipped from the shadows and followed her. His stride matched hers. He made no noise. No footsteps. No breaths. There were no sounds save that of the wind in the trees and the traffic on the interstate a half-mile away. Galilee felt his presence before she saw or heard him. It was a strange chill which crept up her spine and settled into the base of her brain. From there, the freezing sensation spread out along her sensory neurons to every cell of her body. A shiver could not correctly manifest the cold which overcame her. Something was wrong. Her shadow picked up his pace. He seemed to know that Galilee was on the verge of confronting him. He would get to her first. Galilee's right hand flew to the shoulder holster which should have been housed under her jacket. It wasn't there. She'd been forced to turn it in with her badge. She had no time to think. It was too late. The man's arm encircled her neck like a vice. She couldn't find breath enough to scream. In retaliation, she kicked her leg out behind her straight into his groin. Her assailant didn't react to the blinding pain which should have been overcoming him. Instead, the man delivered a knee to her backbone. The blow forced Galilee to go limp in his arms. He threw her to the pavement and continued the attack. Swift, strong punches were delivered to her ribs and face while all the time he held her still so she could not struggle against him. No matter how hard Galilee squinted into the darkness, she never saw anything more than a shadow. "Jesus help me." At the precise moment that her prayer was croaked out, the streetlight above her came on. She did not recognize the man's face or physical appearance, but there was no mistaking the emotion in his gaze. He was surprised enough by the light to ease his attack. Galilee pushed herself up on one arm, trying to level her eyes at his. What she saw there was terrifying. She was looking into the eyes of evil himself. Galilee. Jordan screamed the name as he sat straight up in his bed. Galilee was in danger. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. Since the fall of the Angel of Light, there has been an ongoing battle between good and evil raging in our world. We are not the warriors in this battle, but the prize. Each and every day our souls are pulled both in the direction of God and the direction of Satan. It is ultimately our decision as to where and how we proceed. But, we are not helpless in this war. Through the sacrifice of Jesus, we are given the power to overcome the legions of Satan, and his legions are everywhere. We are a small, but powerful organization created to aid humanity in the war against Satan. Our directive is clear: defy the wicked one through our testimony and the power of our faith. Our adventures are strange ones, wrought with what some might call paranormal activity. However, we know better. There is nothing supernatural about Satan, or the Cross Files. Jordan was awake and getting dressed before the full meaning of his dream struck him. Was he crazy? Since when did he assume that his dreams were anything more than dreams? Since I met Galilee. He muttered to himself with a glance in the mirror. Galilee Gilchrist. Now, there was a woman unlike any he had met before. She was beautiful beyond compare. Her ebony hair fell in natural waves to the middle of her back like a midnight waterfall. She had eyes such a deep brown that they appeared black. He could lose himself in that abyss if he weren't careful. Full mauve lips shaped like a cupid's bow, high chiseled cheekbones, a copper skin tone that accented her fall complexion. She was a beauty and didn't even know it. Even in an oppressive black business suit the generous curves of her figure were evident. He had to push her image from his mind as he climbed behind the wheel of his car. Jordan had seen many beautiful women before, although none were quite as breathtaking as that masterpiece. In all honesty, it wasn't her appearance which had him running in circles. It was her personality. Her faith. He'd never given Christianity a serious thought until meeting Galilee a few hours ago. Now, he couldn't keep her heartfelt testimony from his mind. He was abruptly drawn from his thoughts as the street around him began to resemble the one in his dream. There, below a darkened street lamp was a blot on the cement. It sickened him to think that Galilee could be that blot. He jumped from the car without turning it off. Galilee? The blot moved. Get thee behind me, Satan. It whispered in a barely audible tone. Jordan bit back a moan. It was Galilee. Or, at least, it sounded like her. Her clothes were torn and tattered, soaked through with what he could only assume was her blood. Her eyes were already beginning to swell shut. Tenderly, he lifted the petite Jewish woman into his arms and carried her to his car. He laid her along the back seat gently. It's all right, Lee. Everything's fine. I'm going to get you to a hospital. No. The force of the refusal shocked him. He'd thought she was almost unconscious. Apparently, she was still quite coherent. Just take me home, Jordan. I want to go home. All right. He conceded as he fastened himself in the driver's seat and shifted the car back into drive. But, we're calling the police. No. Another strong refusal. I'm sorry, Jordan, but we can't. They would never find the thing that did this. Jordan glanced in his review mirror. Thing? Satan. That one word contained such hatred that Jordan shivered in his seat. Galilee, are you telling me the devil beat you up? He asked skeptically. Perhaps she wasn't as coherent as he'd thought. Don't mock me. She commanded. I know what I saw. He can assume many pleasing shapes. He can make himself look like a man, but there's no hiding the evil in his eyes. You can think I'm crazy if you like, but Satan attacked me tonight. I know he did. Jordan pulled off in front of her apartment building and moved around the car to pick her up again. She seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but allowed him to carry her up the stairs and into the living room of her apartment. I'm going to get you some ice for your eyes, he called as he disappeared into her kitchen. Galilee laid her head back against a couch cushion, biting her lower lip to hold back the sobs of pain. Jordan? How did you find me? He poked his head out the kitchen door. Just driving by. You're lying. You weren't just driving by at 3 in the morning. Jordan emerged with 2 homemade ice packs. Got me there. He admitted. The shadow of a smile passed over his face as he continued. I had a dream about you, Lee. I couldn't live another moment without seeing your beautiful face. Even through the bruises and the blood he could see her blush. I think you'll have to go quite a while before you see it again, if you ever do, she whispered, wincing as she held the ice packs to her eyes. Jordan hesitantly brushed a few stray hairs away from her face. Those bruises aren't going to scar. They'll be a distant memory in a week or two. I've had my fair share of them. He paused. And, just so you know, I'm not going to go away empty-handed. Turns out you're even more beautiful inside than you are out. I'm going to throw up on your dockers. She warned with a groan. You have horrible timing, Mr. Thomas. Today, I lost my job, found out my parents were murdered, and was beaten to a bloody pulp by Satan. Do you really think this is the appropriate time to be hitting on me? Jordan grinned. You need a pick-me-up, just so happens that I'm good at that job. An answer to prayer? Galilee suggested. Her split and swollen lips curved upward in a smile despite the pain it involved. He didn't protest as quickly as she'd thought he would. Instead, he sat beside her in silence. She was about to change the subject when he replied. Quite possibly. Galilee's eyebrows rose in amusement. He's tugging at your heart, isn't he? I can tell. I don't know. Maybe. I don't have the clarity that you do. He fastened his eyes upon his shoes. The humor in his past few statements was gone. Jesus wasn't the only one tugging at his heart. Soon you will. Galilee stated confidently. Soon, all will be revealed. She winced at the pain from her wounds. Jordan noticed that wave of pain and was up again before she could hold out a hand to stop him. Where's your Tylenol? Medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Galilee called back. Jordan came back with a glass of ice water and 2 Tylenol PM tablets. Take these. The pain is bad, but you need to try to get some sleep tonight. Go to your bedroom and lay down. I'll be in here on the couch if you need me. Galilee opened her mouth to protest, but Jordan closed her jaw with a tap to her chin. No arguments. You were just attacked outside your apartment. If you're right and Satan is after you, that locked door isn't going to stop him. You shouldn't be alone right now. I'm staying. That's final. She smiled, leaning forward to press a kiss to his cheek. She pulled in a little closer so that her mouth was near his ear. God bless you, Jordan, she whispered. When she was closed off safely in her bedroom, Jordan prepared the couch for an overnight. What had gotten into him? He barely knew this woman. Face it, Jordan. Whether you want to admit or not, you've got it bad. Outside the apartment building, a shaking hand picked up his cell phone and again pressed speed dial. Sir? There's been a development, she snuck out. Ali exit, we weren't watching it. Well, sir, we believe that the adversary may have taken advantage of our absence. No, we don't believe she was seriously hurt. Someone else intervened. We've identified him as an employee of the United Nations, one Mr. Jordan Thomas. He appears to be clean as far as criminal records go, but I believe the father's got quite a long list of sins on his records. No, sir, he's not saved. Not yet anyway. Possibly, it might be worth considering. They work well together. Yes, sir. I will be making contact shortly. I'll be touching base with you again in the morning. Good evening, sir. Jordan awoke to the customized ring of his cell phone. He groaned and muttered a few curses before he managed to fumble the flip phone open. Thomas, what do you want? If you know what's good for you, you leave the zealot to her own devices. The tone of the man's voice was so low that it caused a chill to travel down the length of his spine. Listen, buddy, I don't know who this is. A friend with similar interests. Gilchrist is ours. If you don't leave her alone, we won't be responsible for the consequences. You are bringing this upon yourself. She's a zealot. You want nothing to do with her or her religious nonsense. Jordan stiffened. Did you just threaten me? Are you the one who attacked her last night? What kind of monster leaves a woman in that condition? You're one sick puppy. You can save your warnings and your threats for someone who gives a figure I don't. If you have a fight with her, you've got a fight with me. Period. He slammed the phone shut and threw it onto the couch beside him. It was only then that he noticed the silhouette in the bedroom doorway. Good morning, Lee. How much of that did you hear? Good morning, Jordan, enough to know that I owe God a debt of gratitude for sending me a friend like you. Thank you for last night. You didn't have to stay. I would have been fine. It was only then that she stepped out into the light. Jordan flinched before he could stop himself. Both of her eyes were ringed in deep purple bruises. Her nose, although not broken, had swollen to match the size and condition of her lips. Oh, Galilee. I wish I'd gotten there sooner. He moaned, standing up to better examine her wounds. That guy really worked you over. You sure you don't want to go to a doctor? Yes, I'm fine. Really? Galilee insisted, falling back into an easy chair. Like Hugh said last night, they'll go away in a week or two. And, stop blaming yourself before I get mad. You didn't need to get there sooner. God was with me. He sent you there when you were needed and not a minute sooner. Jordan was about to protest when he was interrupted by a knock at the door. He grabbed Galilee's arm before she could get up from her chair. With a quick shake of his head, he held her in place. He didn't want her getting hurt again, FBI agent or not. Yeah, buddy, what can I do for you? He requested of the man standing on the opposite side of Galilee's front door. Her visitor was an African-American man who towered above Jordan's 6 feet 1 inch frame. Mr. Thomas, I would like to come in and speak to Miss Gilchrist. Jordan blocked the door with his body. No way. Nobody's getting in to see Galilee until I know what's going on. All will be revealed. I assure you, Mr. Thomas, I mean you and Miss Gilchrist no harm. I am merely a messenger, a guardian if you will. Jordan felt a slight pressure on his shoulder and turned to see Galilee at his side. It's all right, Jordan. Let him in. You know him? No, but I know he can be trusted. She whispered as she gestured to the cross necklace around his neck. He's a believer. Jordan moved aside and followed the large man into Galilee's living room. Lee gestured to the armchair before taking a seat on the couch. After a moment's hesitation, Jordan sat down beside her. Something about this situation was making him nervous. Who are you? He demanded. You may call me Malachi, for that is the only name I shall ever give you. Malachi? Lee breathed. You're the one who left me the note. He turned his attention toward Galilee. I must apologize for your condition, Miss Gilchrist. I was sent to protect you from the enemy's advances. I was lax. You slipped out a back entrance. Had it not been for Mr. Thomas's miraculous appearance, I fear your state would be far worse. Who are you? Galilee asked carefully. What does this have to do with me, and the enemy? It has everything to do with you and the adversary. Malachi explained. As it would seem, Mr. Thomas, it has much to do with you as well. Me? Jordan asked in disbelief. You have been chosen to enter into a battle of mythic proportions. A spiritual war which began with original sin and shall not end until Satan is cast into a pit of fire. It is a battle for the souls of man. A battle for the world in which we live. A battle for Jesus. A battle against Satan. I make no false promises. It will be treacherous. The encounters you have had in the past 24 hours are just the beginning. You have free will. It is your choice. Will you do service for your king, Jordan? God has called you to action, Galilee. Will you answer him? Episode 3, The battle lines are drawn. For there is nothing covered, that shall not be revealed, neither hid, that shall not be known. Therefore whatsoever ye have spoken in darkness shall be heard in the light, and that which ye have spoken in the ear in closets shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. Luke 12:2-3. Last time, on the Cross Files. You have been chosen to enter into a battle of mythic proportions. A spiritual war which began with original sin and shall not end until Satan is cast into a pit of fire. It is a battle for the souls of man. A battle for the world in which we live. A battle for Jesus. A battle against Satan. I make no false promises. It will be treacherous. The encounters you have had in the past 24 hours are just the beginning. You have free will. It is your choice. Will you do service for your king, Jordan? God has called you to action, Galilee. Will you answer him? Galilee's heart was pounding so loudly she could hear it echo faintly through her thoughts. Could this really be happening? Was this man serious? Did God really have some special purpose for her, some special plan which included her involvement? Her bruised cheeks flushed with excitement at the prospect. I gave my life to Christ years ago, Malachi. It is his to do with as he pleases. If you really believe this is what God wants for me, then I am more than willing to do whatever is asked of me. Jordan did a quick double take at Galilee's immediate acceptance of this impossible situation. What was going on? Some strange man comes to her door only hours after she'd been beaten within an inch of her life, and Galilee agrees to enter into some insane battle. This man sounded like part of some crazy doomsday cult. Galilee, shouldn't you think about this first? He whispered with a wary glance towards the large, dark man. What is there to think about? Yesterday, I lost my job. I have no source of income, no previous engagements which would hold me back. Yesterday, I found out my mother, father, and foster brother were murdered. No one will miss me if I die. Yesterday, I was beaten and left for dead by a being who was at the very least working for the evil one. I'm not safe now. I can't see where joining this fight of Malachi's is going to make a difference. If I'm going to die, I'm going to go out swinging, she declared firmly. Jordan's jaw set in annoyance. He barely knew this woman, but it was taking all of his self-control not to oppose her. He wanted to tell her that he would miss her if she died. Was he crazy? He didn't know a thing about her. Or did he? He knew that after a few short hours he had come to respect and revere her like no other. Her faith was something he wanted to understand. After knowing her for less than a day, he knew he couldn't live with himself if she was injured. His gaze shifted from Malachi to Galilee and back again. What was he supposed to do? He had a good job at the United Nations. No, scratch that. It was a great job. It was the kind of job of which people dreamed. Did they really expect him to give it up to go fight in some strange war? He was surprised when he felt a light pressure on his arm. It was Galilee's hand. Jordan, it's all right. I understand. I think God will, too. You've only just met me. I can't expect you to uproot your entire life because of one short encounter. I don't believe any of us will think any less of you if you turn down this offer. She whispered gently. He stared into her brown eyes, veiled by the swelling of her eyelids. Someone had tried to hurt her. That thought frightened him. His dream, he dreamed of her being beaten as it was occurring. Could that have been an act of God? The startling revelation hit him suddenly. He couldn't let anyone hurt Galilee. He didn't share her faith. He didn't share her religion, but that didn't affect the feelings he was already beginning to have for her. You kidding? I'm always up for a challenge. He quipped with a smile before he turned back to Malachi. Where do I sign up? Since the fall of the Angel of Light, there has been an ongoing battle between good and evil raging in our world. We are not the warriors in this battle, but the prize. Each and every day our souls are pulled both in the direction of God and the direction of Satan. It is ultimately our decision as to where and how we proceed. But, we are not helpless in this war. Through the sacrifice of Jesus, we are given the power to overcome the legions of Satan, and his legions are everywhere. We are a small, but powerful organization created to aid humanity in the war against Satan. Our directive is clear: defy the wicked one through our testimony and the power of our faith. Our adventures are strange ones, wrought with what some might call paranormal activity. However, we know better. There is nothing supernatural about Satan, or the Cross Files. Malachi nodded as if he had been expecting their agreement all along. Welcome to the fellowship. His voice was lighter. His stony expression had melted into one of warmth and congeniality. The fellowship? Jordan asked with a glance at Galilee. That is what we call ourselves. Malachi explained patiently. Our organization is quite large. Although, the number is insignificant. You will never be meeting the others. I think it would be safe for me to assume that you will never be having contact with anyone other than myself. I am your... He paused as if seeking the right word. Messenger. Galilee offered with a grin. Isn't that why you call yourself Malachi? It is, after all, the Hebrew word for a messenger or an angel. And I'm assuming you aren't an angel. Malachi chuckled. No, Lee, I am definitely not an angel. I'm just as human as you are. But, you're right. Malachi isn't my real name. It was given to me by the Fellowship, probably for the reason you just pointed out. I had never given it much thought before. As I was saying, I will be your messenger. Any and all contact with the Fellowship goes through me. I don't think I like that idea. Jordan interrupted with a scowl. I mean, it sounds too cloak and dagger. We aren't going to be doing anything illegal, are we? Probably not. Malachi considered the question and amended his answer. At least, nothing against God's laws. I would like to remind you, though, that we are to obey the law of God before we obey the laws of man. If they contradict each other, God goes first. Jordan didn't seem convinced but waved his hand at Malachi to continue. You will be receiving your credentials shortly. The Fellowship has had you both classified as private investigators. Every so often, you will find a brown envelope with information on a new case. It will then be your responsibility to investigate this case as you see fit. We will handle all expenses. If you need anything, you will only need to call me on my cell phone, and I will make all arrangements after a case is complete. You will find an unspecified amount of money transferred into your bank account. Your exact salary is not known, but suffice it to say, that you shall never want for money while you work with Fellowship. Do either of you have any questions? The duo looked at each other, shrugged simultaneously, and turned back to Malachi. Cautiously, Galilee ventured a question. Yesterday, I was interrogated by two men in black suits. They seemed mechanical, and they kept asking if they had contacted me yet. Malachi's brown skin took on a grey hue. They've threatened you already? Jordan swallowed hard. I got a phone call just before you came. I think it may have been the same people. They warned me to stay away from the Zealot. The Legion. Malachi murmured. The Legion? Jordan asked in confusion. Do you mean the American Legion, the French Foreign Legion, what? And he asked him, what is thy name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. Galilee whispered in reply. Malachi had regained his composure by now and seemed impressed by Galilee's observation. I told you it was a battle. The Legion is the other side of that battle. Our enemy. The army of the adversary. Satan's goons? Jordan inquired with a hint of sarcasm. Some are demons and some are merely his most devout human followers. Malachi explained. You will encounter them many times throughout your investigations. Do not fear them, they can do little to harm you. Yeah, right. Jordan muttered as his worried gaze shifted to Galilee. They're not dangerous. Pussycats. That's what they are. That was an unfortunate accident, Jordan. I assure you, it does not happen often. Malachi explained quickly. The Legion is at a disadvantage. There is little they can do to a believer if that believer calls upon the power of Christ. A ringing from his pocket interrupted him. Excuse me. He fished the phone from his pocket and flipped it open. Yes, sir. I'm with them, now. They accept, yes, him, too, what? His voice held an alarm tone that made both Galilee and Jordan tense. I'll be right there. Malachi flipped his phone shut and turned back to them. I'm sorry. I've really got to go. Watch your mail, your credentials and first case should be arriving shortly. With that, the large man stood up from his chair and showed himself to the door. Galilee and Jordan sat in silence for several minutes before she broke it. You should have turned him down. Galilee's hushed voice held a venom which surprised Jordan. Why? You're not a believer. You have no protection against Satan. You'll be going in naked. I can't let you do it. I don't think you really have any say in the matter, Lee. Jordan bit back. He had to protect his manhood. Maliki didn't ask you if you wanted to work with me. I accepted, we're partners. End of story. She shook her head and pushed herself up from the couch. You'll regret it, Jordan. You can't fight Satan on your own. You're powerless. You're human, and he's the devil. Jordan left Galilee's apartment later that afternoon with a violent anger that needed release. How dare she suggest that he wasn't fit for the job? She was the FBI agent who couldn't even defend herself from a mugger. Who was really the incompetent one in the partnership? It certainly wasn't him. As was customary under such circumstances, Jordan found himself at the gym. He had to work off his fury somehow. Unlike his colleagues, he didn't enjoy frequenting the local taverns, drinking enough tequila to fill a hot tub, and then starting a quarrel with some equally plastered drunken bum. That wasn't his style. Jordan preferred to release his anger on the bench. He could push himself so much farther with the weights when he was angry, or frustrated. Why does she have to be so beautiful? That unexpected thought almost caused him to drop the weights on his chest. Wait, I'm supposed to be angry with her, not thinking about how beautiful she is, but, she is beautiful. He lifted the bar back into its holders and sat up. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he sighed heavily. All right, God, I've never really had a conversation with you before. But if Galilee puts that much stock in you and your abilities, you can't be all that bad. He looked around the empty weight room self-consciously. He didn't like the idea of someone walking in on him while he was talking to himself. Of course, Galilee would have probably reprimanded him for such behavior. I just don't understand what's going on. I mean, I just met her. Why can't I get her off my mind? Why does she have to think so little of me? You should have taken my advice while you still could, Jordan. The deep, ominous voice echoed through the empty room and interrupted his prayer. Who? What? He swiveled, looking for the source of the voice. A man stood just inside the doorway. He was dressed completely in black with dark sunglasses covering his eyes from view. The man took a few steps toward him, his lips curled in a cruel smile. You should have listened to the zealot. You're not safe anymore, Jordan. No one can save you now. Jordan yelped as he felt someone grab his arms and slam him backwards against the seat. Two more men were now holding him steady against the bench as the other man slid a pair of brass knuckles onto his hands. No one can save you now, Jordan. You're ours. Think again, buddy. Jordan's eyes opened wide at the familiar voice. Lee? He struggled to sit up and find the source of that voice, but he could not fight the strength of those men. The leader turned abruptly to face the doorway, his mouth now pulled back in a sneer. You think you can stop us? You're no match for us, Gilchrist. You never were. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but you can never hurt me. She chanted as she advanced on the dark trio. Be not afraid of them that kill the body, and after that have no more that they can do. You cannot hurt me. I do not fear you. The man took a step away from her. Jordan could feel the slightest tremor in the hands of those holding him. What do you think you're doing? The man hissed. I am taking up my cross and following him. I am donning the whole armor of God, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. If I were you, I'd leave while I still had a leg on which to stand. You have no power of us, Gilchrist. One of Jordan's captors ventured in a voice tinged with fear. Perhaps. But, I know someone who does. I'm sure you're acquainted the Son of God, aren't you? Galilee asked as her swollen, bloodied lips turned up in a triumphant smile. Begone with you. The lights in the room flashed off for a brief moment. Jordan felt the hands let go of his wrists just seconds before the lights came back on to reveal the room empty, save for the presence of Galilee and Jordan. Jordan sat up slowly, rubbing at his wrists. How did you know the Legion would come after me? You're not a believer. You're not under Christ's protection. They can harm you all they like. I thought they might make an attempt to frighten So, I followed you here. I'm sorry about what I said. You just have to understand that I don't want you getting hurt, especially when you're not a Christian. He fell silent. Her words were slowly sinking into his mind. She was worried about his safety. Give me time, Galilee. I need to think this Christianity thing through. I'm not making any promises, but if it's even half as wonderful as you make it out to be, I don't see how I can stay away forever. Galilee smirked. It's twice as wonderful as I make it out to be, Jordan. Nothing can compare. Now, would you go put on some clothes? She quipped as she tossed him a clean towel from the bin. He was sitting on that exercise equipment in gym shorts with no shirt on his sweaty, finely muscled upper torso. It was terribly disconcerting. She hardly wanted to have a theological discussion with him while she was so painfully aware of his good looks. Jordan quirked an eyebrow at the look on her face. She was uncomfortable. Why? His chin dipped to touch his chest as he glanced down at his attire. Oh. That's why. No shirt. He should have known. Sure thing. He stopped at the door to the locker room. Hey, Galilee? When do you think we'll get our first assignment? I think we'll get it when God and the fellowship feel we're ready for one. I'll wait for you in the lobby. Oh, and Jordan? Yes? Take a shower while you're in there. You smell like gym socks. Sir, you made a wonderful choice. Galilee and Jordan are well on their way to being a dynamic duo. They have much to learn before they are prepared for true combat, Malachi. Perhaps, but they passed your test, didn't they? Galilee's faith is strong enough for the both of them. At the moment, Jordan will have to take the final step. Galilee cannot carry the burden of belief by herself forever. She will have to convince Jordan of the truth. Another test. She's up to the challenge. When I do give them the information for their first case. Soon, Malachi. Soon. Episode 4, Elymas. O full of all subtlety and all mischief, thou, child of the devil, thou enemy of all righteousness, wilt thou not cease to pervert the right ways of the Lord? Acts 13:10. State Senator Gary Fielding paced nervously in front of his big screen projection television. He was an average-looking fellow. His hair was sprinkled with more salt than pepper. His eyes were a pale gray, his skin sickly white, a receding hairline dominating his forehead, and the telltale signs of stress showing around the corner of his eyes and mouth. There was nothing about Gary Fielding that warranted a second look when passing him on the street. And yet, the man had been a successful politician since graduating from William and Mary nearly 3 decades before. Are you sure about this? He asked in a voice quivering with excitement. The question was directed at the only other person in the senator's office, his advisor Elymas Parthos. Elymas ran a hand across his short, white beard. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You will be the next governor of Virginia. Are you sure? He asked with a sidelong glance at the news anchor and his up-to-the-minute election projections. Gary, calm down. The older man soothed as he slipped from his chair and crossed the room to put a reassuring arm around the shorter man's shoulders. You've done everything required of you. You've voted correctly on every bill. The Master has a great deal in store for you. You've given him what he requires, and he will give you what you most desire. So you've said. The politician muttered with a sigh. I just can't help but wonder. The man's conscience was nagging at him again. He hadn't voted correctly. He hadn't voted the way he wanted, or even along party lines. He'd voted the way Elymas advised him. He should have disposed of the man long ago, but ever since his first election for a town councillor 28 years ago, he'd been afraid to leave him. Elymas had a way about him. He knew things he shouldn't know. Lots of things. He always predicted the outcome of every political campaign perfectly. Elymas always knew what the people at the rallies most wanted to hear. It was amazing. The man must have a close relationship with this master of his. It was the only explanation. This Justin, WNN is now willing to predict a winner in the Virginia state governor race. According to our latest projections, State Senator Gary Fielding will win by a 20% majority. Gary stumbled backwards into his chair. "I don't believe it." "Believe it?" Elimas whispered. "Thank God." Gary hung his head in his hands with relief. He missed the look of hatred in the old man's eyes. Elimas held back a snarl. "God had nothing to do with your win, Gary. You owe your success to me, and my master. Since the fall of the Angel of Light, there has been an ongoing battle between good and evil raging in our world. We are not the warriors in this battle, but the prize. Each and every day our souls are pulled both in the direction of God and the direction of Satan. It is ultimately our decision as to where and how we proceed. But, we are not helpless in this war. Through the sacrifice of Jesus, we are given the power to overcome the legions of Satan, and his legions are everywhere. We are a small, but powerful organization created to aid humanity in the war against Satan. Our directive is clear: defy the wicked one through our testimony and the power of our faith. Our adventures are strange ones, wrought with what some might call paranormal activity. However, we know better. There is nothing supernatural about Satan, or the Cross Files. Jordan Thomas here. If you aren't a gorgeous brunette with Friday night free, you might as well hang up now. Galilee smiled into her phone. "Jordan, you idiot." She laughed. It had been a month since they had first met under terrible circumstances. Her bruises had long since healed. Jordan had been right, not one had marred her beautiful face with a scar. He was more than a little thankful for that. The two of them had become fast friends. Few days passed when they didn't find some reason to get together. Neither one of them was sure if their constant companionship was due to a mutual attraction, loneliness, or simply an anxiety over their first case. Jordan had turned in his resignation at the United Nations. Galilee had finished her final paperwork at the FBI. Now, it was a waiting game. "I know you have caller ID, Jordan. You're not fooling me." "Hey. You didn't hang up. So, my dear, where are we going Friday night?" "The governor's inaugural ball." "Darling, let it never be said that you're a predictable date. This isn't a date, you Nimrod. I received a case file today." Galilee informed him in a hushed voice. "You what?" "I'll be right there." The phone line went dead in her hand. "Oh, Jordan." She sighed with a smile. Never a dull moment. Before she even realized what she was doing, Galilee found herself in the bathroom brushing out her hair and reapplying a little makeup. She paused, her powder puff hanging in the air in front of her face. "Galilee, what are you doing?" "This is Jordan. He's seen you look your absolute worst. You could walk out there in curlers and a mud mask while wearing an old, ratty bathrobe and still look better than you did after the attack. Pull yourself together. He's your partner. You don't get involved with your partners, and more importantly, he's not a Christian. You never get involved with men who aren't Christians. No negotiations. That's the rule." Resolutely, she put away her makeup and wandered back into her living room. No sooner had she ensconced herself on her sofa, than she heard the sound of her apartment door opening with a clamor. "Honey, I'm home." A familiar voice echoed through the foyer and into the living room. "Stop fooling around, Geordie. I'm not in the mood. We've actually got some work to do for a change." She responded with a frown of disapproval. Jordan slouched in the doorway. His expression was that of a little boy who had just watched his helium balloon drift into the great unknown. Galilee sighed. "Jordan, I'm sorry. I'm just a little crabby because I can't understand what this is all about." Jordan perked up again as he plopped onto the couch beside her. "So, what's got the great Sherlock Gilchrist confused?" "This." She handed the file over to him and peered over his shoulder as he examined the contents. "It's all about former state Senator Gary Fielding. The governor-elect of Virginia. I voted for him." Jordan mused as he flipped through the pages of information. "He gave some really great speeches. You live in Arlington, did you vote for him?" Galilee frowned and shook her head. "Sorry, but no. I didn't find his platform to be very Christian. You let your religion dictate how you vote." Jordan seemed disgusted by the thought. Christianity is not a religion, Jordan. It's more than that. It's having a personal relationship with God through Christ. And, yes, Christianity dictates everything about my life, either directly or indirectly. I won't apologize for that, because I know I'm right. And, I'm wrong? Jordan rolled his eyes. Let's not get into the salivation discussion again, okay? I need time. Galilee hesitated but finally nodded. There's only one thing about this guy that bothers me. Do I really want to know? He's never lost an election. Not one. In 28 years of politics, no less. Doesn't that seem strange to you? He shrugged. The guy just knows what the people want to hear. My point exactly. People joke about politicians selling their souls to get elected. What if Gary did just that? You're kidding, right? Jordan asked as he melted into laughter. Galilee, people don't actually sell their souls to Satan. That's Hollywood. This guy did not sell his soul. No one would be that stupid. Maybe he didn't know he was doing it at the time. She observed softly. He isn't called the father of all liars and the deceiver for nothing. Galilee saw Jordan open his mouth to interrupt. Regardless, we've received 2 invitations to the governor's inaugural ball. Are you going to come with me, or do I need to find a date? Jordan flinched. Why couldn't he be her date? That question stung, but he managed a nod. Sure, sweet thing, I'll be there with bells on. It was very difficult for Jordan not gawk at Galilee when she emerged from her bedroom Friday night. She wore a pale silver gown of satin organza which clung modestly to every curve and contour of her figure. Her thick black hair had been allowed to dry into its natural tight curls. She was breathtaking, and it took a great deal of self-control to restrain himself from kissing right there. Well, how do I look? She asked uncertainly, turning in a small circle to display the whole dress. Jordan swallowed hard. Galilee, you look incredible. Although, I don't think the governor-elect will like it. Why? Because it's his inaugural ball, and in that dress you're going to steal the show. Galilee turned 3 shades of red before she managed to laugh the compliment away. Let's go. The fellowship isn't paying us to stand around here all night. Lee? This may seem like a really stupid question, but what exactly are we going to be doing here anyway? Jordan whispered as he offered her his arm and escorted her into the Hilton's luxurious ballroom. I mean, you can't actually go up to this guy and ask him if he's made a bargain with Beelzebul now, can you? Galilee laughed lightly. I have a plan, Geordie. Just help me get close to the man, and I'll do the rest. Jordan's eyebrow shot up. She had a plan. Why did that phrase bother him so much? I just hope her God is around to protect her tonight. It would be 3 hours before Jordan worked the 2 into a position near the new Virginia governor. The moment Galilee crossed his line of vision, the unattractive little man removed his attention from the man speaking to the beauty standing so near his side. Jordan saw the look in Gary's eyes and immediately felt himself prickle. Do I know you, miss? Galilee shook her head, her ebony curls bouncing around her head as she did so. No, Sue, I do not believe we have had the pleasure. She soothed in a thick southern drawl. The sudden change in accents made Jordan blink in surprise. How had she gone from her patchwork quilt of dialects to a dead-on Scarlett O'Hara? Galilee extended one dainty hand. I am Lily Gilchrist, and I must say that this is an honor. I do not know if I have ever been this close to a future president before. Her words were as sweet as honey and dripped from her tongue with practiced ease. Apparently, Gary Fielding was enjoying every minute of it. Gary took the proffered hand and shook it lightly. His eyes never left Lee. Future president? Ma'am, you may be shooting just a little too high. At the moment, I'm focusing my attention on serving the good people of Virginia for the next 4 years. I'm not sure if I'd ever be ready for the presidency. Gailey's lower lip trembled in a pout. I am sorry you feel that way. My superior will be very displeased to hear it. Your superior? Gary's eyes flitted to Jordan. She merely laughed. Not him, silly. My superior doesn't make personal appearances often. You see, Sue, I represent an individual with quite a bit of power and prestige who is always looking for another convert, I suppose you might say. Really? Well, I certainly hope you and your superior won't write me off as a lost cause too quickly. Gary interrupted. I would hate to think I'd missed an opportunity. Oh. Galilee laughed again. Don't you worry, Sue. We're known for giving people a second chance. Sometimes even a third or fourth. I think it would be safe to say that my superior is a very forgiving man. Galilee. Or should I call you Lily? What was that all about? Jordan demanded as they drove away from the Hilton later that night. Galilee waved it off with her hand. I worked undercover a lot for the Bureau. I don't know why you're so upset. I didn't lie. Lily could easily be a nickname for Galilee, and my superior is a forgiving man of great power and prestige. Malachi? Jordan asked with a frown. Jesus, you Nimrod. She sighed in frustration. When are you going to learn that God is the only one to whom I answer? Not you. Not the FBI. Not Malachi. God. Gosh. Calm down, already. Sorry, I brought it up. Am I going to be allowed to accompany you to your meeting with him tomorrow? Galilee sat back against the car seat. I would rather you didn't. You don't have God's protection. But, I really don't see how I can hold you back. You're right. You can't. Where you go, I go. She glanced up at him with a shy smile. Whither thou goest, I shall go. She whispered. Jordan quirked an eyebrow. Right. That's what I said. Gary kicked off his uncomfortable dress shoes and loosened his bow tie. Elimus? You around anywhere? He called as he sank into an easy chair with a grateful sigh. Of course. Gary's glance shifted to the doorway. That was a most interesting evening. Really? How so? Elimus asked with interest as he joined the new governor in the sitting room. I think I may have gotten my first bid for the presidency. Elimus did not allow his surprise to show on his face. Instead, he took a seat and leaned forward to watch the man's reaction. What sort of bid? Gary closed his eye, leaning his head back against the chair with his eyes closed to relive the memory. This knockout came up to me at the ball and started tell me about her boss. He's apparently some guy with money to burn who thinks I'd be a good president. Tell me more about this knockout. Elimus inquired. Maybe 5.5 feet, 115 pounds, black hair, copper skin, dark eyes, an hourglass figure. She looks like an Arabian princess. Gorgeous. Elimus pondered the description for a moment. She was Arabic. Perhaps there was nothing to worry about. Still. I want to be there when you meet with her. I don't know if that would be wise. I couldn't really explain your presence. Gary backpedaled quickly. Relax, Gary. They won't see me. You and I both know that I don't have to be seen. Elimus soothed. We'll just do what we've done at all of your rallies and press conferences, yes? The governor relaxed only slightly. I suppose. If you think you need to be there. I do. Galilee gazed at her reflection in the revolving glass door. She had dressed conservatively, while still trying to maintain Lily's appeal. She certainly hoped she'd achieved that. Jordan kept casting wary glances in her direction. If she was interpreting that correctly, he thought she had succeeded. Miss Gilchrist, a charming, middle-aged woman, stood to greet them as they entered the governor's offices. Governor Fielding has been expecting you. If you'll just follow me. The receptionist led them through a labyrinth of corridors and into a spacious office. Mississippi Gilchrist. Gary seemed excited by her arrival. Although, his excitement was subdued when he noticed her partner beside her. Please, call me Lily. Galilee started right where she'd left off the night before, playing her improvised Scarlett O'Hara. I do believe I forgot to introduce you to my associate Dan Thomas. It's a pleasure. Gary stated congenially as he shook Jordan's hand. Jordan forced a smile and mumbled a similar comment. Please have a seat and let's get down to business. Once Galilee and Jordan were comfortably seated, Gary allowed himself to speak his thoughts aloud. Last night you mentioned this superior of yours. What exactly am I going to have to do to get his support? Galilee opened her mouth to answer and stopped. Instead, she turned around to gaze at something behind her chair. Aren't you going to introduce us to your friend, Governor Fielding? Gary blanched. My friend? He croaked. He could see Elymas. But, he had never thought for a moment that anyone else could. They'd never been able to before. Not at the rallies. Not at the speeches. Never. The shock was also reflected on Elymas's aged, hard visage. He held Galilee's gaze in a cold stare as if trying to bore into her soul. She merely smiled, knowing exactly what he would find there. Jordan turned in his seat and stared at the empty room behind them. Lily, there's SHH. Galilee commanded, never breaking away from Elymas's gaze. Just because you can't see him, doesn't mean he isn't here. Elymas grinned wickedly and advanced on Galilee. I am a friend of Gary's, Miss Gilchrist. That is really all that is important. Galilee never batted an eyelash. She knew more about this man than he thought she did. Enough. She spun back towards Gary Fielding. Gary, you have to listen to me. She dropped the southern accent, instead allowing her musical, yet unidentifiable lilt to color her speech. You are being deceived. Lied to. Fooled. My superior, the one to whom I have been referring, is so much more than a man. He is the Son of God. The Savior of mankind. He came here to earth, took on this mortal coil so that we all might see the glory of God. This creature you've been catering to for the past 28 years is not of God. Or, he hasn't been for a very long time. His master is Satan. Whether or not you were fully aware, you have been serving the devil these past few decades. Elymas grabbed Galilee by the shoulders and jerked her from her chair. You are the deceiver. You are the liar. He hissed as he wrapped one hand around her throat. Jordan was on his feet immediately. He had been unable to see the man until he laid a hand on Galilee. Then, Elymas was visible. Get off her! He shouted, attacking the man with all of his might. His punches found purchase in soft flesh, but the blows didn't seem to bother Elymas in the least. Gary sat frozen to his seat. Galilee's words and the scene he was now witnessing were slowly sinking into his clouded mind. Stop, Elymas. Gary commanded. I want to hear her out. Elymas dropped Galilee to the floor. You mustn't listen to her, Gary. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's one of those stupid religious nuts we laugh about. She's crazy. I want to hear her out. Gary repeated. No. Elymas hissed. You will not hear her out. I won't allow it. Gary paled as his advisor pulled something from beneath his shirt and clutched it in his hands. The words he uttered were unrecognizable to many. Although, Galilee understood every word. Despite the pain inflicted by that monster, she was up and racing across the office in seconds. She managed to position herself between Elymas and Gary just as a ray of darkness flashed from Elymas's clenched hands towards the governor. It hovered in the air above Galilee, frozen in position. Elymas's eyes widened in shock. You can't hurt me, Elymas. She whispered, using the name he had never given her. Your powers are nothing compared to the power of God. You are nothing. The dark beam shimmered and dissolved in front of her. You are a sorcerer, a child of Satan and enemy of all that is good and pure in this world. You are a deceiver and a liar. You have twisted God's ways to your evil purpose, and for that you will be punished. By pledging your allegiance to Lucifer, you have made an enemy of the Lord, Elymas. For that, I must pity you. Galilee paused, her eyes glassing over for a moment before she continued. You blinded this man to the truth by your wicked ways. Our God is just. And as a just God, he shall strike you blind for a time. You shall not see the light of the sun again until you realize your evil ways and turn from them, Elymas of Paphos. Even before she finished her sentence, a mist enveloped the room and the lights flashed off. When the electricity once again illuminated the room, Elymas was covering his eyes with both his hands. His lips curled up in a growl as he pulled his hands away. You won't get away this, Galilee. If you think you can pick a fight with the Legion and win, you're wrong. You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over. Galilee laughed. We'll just see about that, won't we? Go back to Gehenna and tell your little demonic friends all about the power of God. After all, you have seen it firsthand. The demon cursed her as he disappeared in a flash of darkness. Both Jordan and Gary stared at the scene in complete shock. What just happened? Gasped the governor. Galilee pulled her chair closer to him before seating herself again. It's a long story, Governor Fielding. Why don't you let me start at the beginning? You see, it all began in the Garden of Eden with Adam, Eve, a serpent and the original sin. Galilee turned off her television set. Governor Fielding had just made his announcement. He'd proclaimed on Virginia's news channel that he was now a Christian. She couldn't wipe the smile from her face. It was only one victory, but what a victory. Slowly, she lowered herself from the sofa to her knees on the carpeted floor. Thank you, Father. Thank you for letting me be a part of this fellowship. I'm honored that you have such faith in my abilities. I will try very hard never to let you down. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to witness to Governor Fielding. After what he's been through, I think he'll be a humble and dedicated Christian for the rest of his life. I'm just worried about Jordan. He saw what we saw, and he still refuses to acknowledge your existence. I'm worried about him. Without your protection, he's vulnerable to Satan and his minions. Please, give me the words to convince him of your love. In Jesus' name, Amen. Jordan lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling. How exactly could he explain what happened in the governor's office? It had all happened so fast. Still, how could he deny it? God, just let me sleep on it, okay? He asked, rolling over onto his side. After an hour of tossing and turning, he drifted off to sleep, and dreams of Galilee. Episode 5, Power in the Blood. Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and pass away. For they sleep not, except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away, unless they cause some to fall. For they eat the bread of wickedness, and drink the wine of violence. Proverbs 4:14-18. Dr. Runyon. A middle-aged woman rushed into the Sugar Creek Emergency Clinic with her long bleached blonde hair trailing behind her. Dr. Runyon. The elderly Dr. Runyon waddled out of examination room A with his wrinkled brow furrowed over his spectacles. I'm here, Mrs. Bloom. I'm here. Calm down, sweetie, and tell the doctor what the trouble is. He soothed as he pushed her into a hall chair and rubbed her back. Mrs. Bloom panted to catch her breath. A teenager, at the diner. She choked. He passed out, he isn't waking up. Well, I'm sure it's nothing to warrant this kind of anxiety, Mrs. Bloom. Just let me warn the nurse that I'm leaving and I'll be right there. Oh, no, that's all right. Jeff is bringing him over here. You're moving him? Drive. Runyon's brow knit again. You really shouldn't move someone like that, Mrs. Bloom. I'm afraid it's a bit too late for that, Doc. Jeff interrupted from the doorway. Dr. Runyon's small eyes widened at the sight of his patient. That's the man who fainted? Yes, sir. The teen was certainly out of place for rural South Dakota. His hair had been dyed black, his fingernails painted the same morbid shade. His skin was unnaturally pale, perhaps an illusion caused by all the black his clothes were comprised of or simply the result of many hours hidden from the sun. The most shocking aspect of his appearance was the many piercings adorning his eyebrows, ears, nose, tongue, and lip. Well, let's get him in room B and have a look at him. As they carried the young man into examination room B, a slip of paper fell out of his pocket and fell unnoticed underneath a cabinet in the waiting area. Since the fall of the Angel of Light, there has been an ongoing battle between good and evil raging in our world. We are not the warriors in this battle, but the prize. Each and every day our souls are pulled both in the direction of God and the direction of Satan. It is ultimately our decision as to where and how we proceed. But, we are not helpless in this war. Through the sacrifice of Jesus, we are given the power to overcome the legions of Satan, and his legions are everywhere. We are a small, but powerful organization created to aid humanity in the war against Satan. Our directive is clear: defy the wicked one through our testimony and the power of our faith. Our adventures are strange ones, wrought with what some might call paranormal activity. However, we know better. There is nothing supernatural about Satan, or the Cross Files. Galilee's lips crinkled up into a cute smile. "You have a dab of ketchup on your nose, Geordie," she teased. Jordan blushed crimson. "I do?" he asked in a flustered voice. Hold on." Lee laid her own hot dog on the coffee table and left the living room couch only to return with a paper towel wadded up in her hand. She grinned maliciously, spit on the towel, and then bent to rub vigorously at the splotch on his nose. "Ah, gross. Galilee. That's disgusting." Jordan tried to fight her off while making gagging noises. "Don't be such a baby. Besides, it's gone now. I don't think it was ever there. Are you calling me a liar?" Galilee placed her hands on her hips and glared at Jordan with feigned malice. "If the name fits." Jordan started before she whacked him on the head with a couch cushion. "You little—" Galilee's angry rebuttal was cut off by the sound of a knock at her door. She sighed irritably and walked off into the foyer. A moment later, she returned with a thick manila envelope in her hands. "You deserve this, Jordan. After all, there is no rest for the wicked." Jordan sat up straighter and stared at the package she held. "Is that what I think it is? Case number 2. It was left on my doorstep by the Invisible Man. Would you like to do the honors?" He took the envelope from her hand and carefully opened the flap. After several seconds of examining the contents he frowned, handing them back to Galilee. "I don't get it." Lee patiently removed the papers from his hands and flipped through them. "These look like copies of medical charts. That's what I don't get. Let's see, over the past 2 weeks 7 teenagers in a small South Dakota town have come down with an unidentified illness. Samples of their blood were sent to the CDC in Atlanta for analysis and produced no known cause of infection. According to cultures and microscopic inspection, there are no viruses, bacteria, fungi, or parasites which could be causing their conditions." Galilee glanced up from the papers to meet Jordan's confused gaze. "I think we're going to South Dakota. I hate my life." Jordan moaned from the passenger seat of their rental car. Galilee had to fight down a smirk. "Why is it that your luggage arrives here safe and sound, Lee, but the airline manages to lose everything of mine but my carry-on? Serves you right for hitting on that stewardess, Jordan. She's a flight attendant. Besides, you were the one who was going to pass out from hunger pains. I got you that extra bag of peanuts, didn't I? Had I known what underhanded methods you were going to use to obtain them, I wouldn't have mentioned the fact that I was hungry," Galilee declared with an unamused glare in his direction. And, who flirted with the pimply teenager at the rental car desk?" Jordan asked with eyebrows raised. "I did no such thing. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Lee." Dr. Runyon stared at the congested hallway of his small-town emergency clinic. Usually, his caseload consisted of sprained ankles, colicky babies, and the town hypochondriac. Running a clinic in South Dakota was supposed to be a relaxing way to retire. But, this was nothing like what he had expected. The Sugar Creek, South Dakota Emergency Clinic's 7 rooms were already housing sick teenagers. The patients' parents now filled the hallway demanding to know what was being done for their children. They should be in a hospital, not some rinky-dink clinic. One mother shouted. Dr. Runyon held up his hand. "I've already talked to the staff of the nearest hospital. They're sending some nurses to help me care for these kids. But, right now, none of us think it's wise to move them." "Excuse me, doctor." A diminutive nurse tugged at the elderly man's sleeve to get his attention. "There are 2 people in your office." They say they're investigators, and they need to talk to you. Thank God. He murmured as he spun away from the angry adults and bustled down the corridor to his office. Dr. Runyon rushed in the door, closed it securely behind himself, and leaned against it as he panted for air. Jordan glanced at his partner incredulously. Galilee caught the look in his iridescent blue eyes. He was apparently unimpressed by the elderly physician. She shrugged her slender shoulders and crossed to the man's side. Dr. Runyon? I'm Galilee Gilchrist, and this is my partner Jordan Thomas. If you're not busy, we would like to ask you a few questions. The old man shook her hand before falling heavily into the chair behind his desk. Of course. Of course. I'll tell you anything and everything I can, which I'm afraid isn't much. He gestured to the seats in front of his desk. Have a seat, please. Thank you. Galilee perched on the edge of her seat, notebook and pencil in hand. What can you tell us about the teenager's conditions? Dr. Runyon sat back against his chair. Patient 0 was an unidentified male who was admitted here exactly 1 week ago. He was unconscious during the first 24 hours of his stay. His physical symptoms were inconclusive. He had a fever of 104 degrees, an inability to hold down solid food, some lesions on his chest, and a terrible cough. His motor function was non-existent. On the third day, he regained partial consciousness. Although, he was not fully aware of his surroundings. He seemed to be having paranoid episodes, claiming we were going to kill him. At times, no one on staff could understand a word he said. 2 days after he was admitted, the others began to arrive. We have 7 here currently. I have no way of knowing when this epidemic is going to stop, or if it ever will. He paused, folding his hands and examining the investigators with curiosity. If I didn't know better, I'd say you two are an answer to my prayers. Galilee grinned. Who says we're not? Jordan rolled his eyes. Can we have a look at this patient 0? I'm afraid not. Dr. Runyon declared with a frown. We haven't released the information yet. To be honest, we're afraid of how the parents will react, but patient 0 died at 4 this morning. Lee bit into her lower lip and glanced at Jordan anxiously. They'd already lost 1 soul. May we see one of the other patients, then? The doctor shrugged. I hope you've got a strong stomach. It isn't pretty. Galilee fell back against the far wall as she watched the nurses and doctor try to revive patient number 2, Cindy Murphy. She'd flatlined nearly 5 minutes ago. Lee held her breath, feeling the tears form in her eyes as the young girl's body remained lifeless. Jordan glanced down at his partner with worry. She didn't look good. Gently, he laid a hand upon her shoulder. Are you all right? She looked up at him slowly, her eyes glassed by tears. Will you pray with me? She asked in a small voice. The expression on her face and the sorrow in her eyes broke Jordan's heart. He could feel the ice which surrounded his faith melting underneath that stare. How could he ever deny her anything? Of course. For a moment, she looked like she might smile. Before she allowed herself that display of gratitude, she took his hand and led him out into the hallway. Galilee bowed her head before beginning. God, we come to you today to pray for Cindy Murphy. I don't know what is happening to her. I know you've sent us here to find out why these kids are sick, but the entire situation seems bleak. I know that through you all things are possible, so I ask that you help to revive Cindy. I'm convinced that her illness has something to do with the Legion. I want to help you attain her soul, but I can't do that if she's dead. Please, help us to unravel this mystery and heal these children. Above all things, let your will be done. In Jesus' name I pray, Amen. Galilee and Jordan raised their heads to find a young woman standing a little further down the hall staring at them. Oh. Gosh, excuse me. She mumbled in embarrassment as she tried to turn and run the other way. Jordan stopped her with a hand on her arm. That's all right. Galilee looked the girl over with a critical eye. What's your name, and what business do you have here at the clinic? The girl's eyes fell to the linoleum floor. My name's Denise D'Onofrio, but everybody calls me Denny. My best friend is Cindy Murphy. Can I see her? Galilee glanced back at the closed examination room door. Not right now, Denny. She's with the doctor. How's she doing? Denny looked to be around 14 or 15 with long strawberry blonde hair and big brown doe eyes. She was cute, in an innocent sort of way. Galilee could tell by the way the teenager avoided eye contact that she was hiding something. Based on that assessment, Lee opted to be bluntly truthful. Not good, Denny. Not good at all. We can't determine what is causing this illness, and we can't heal it until we do. Are you a doctor? Denny cocked her head to the side as she peered at Galilee questioningly. No. I'm an investigator. Like with the FBI? She looked frightened now. Lee held back a flinch. Not exactly. I work for a private firm. Oh. Denny glanced at her watch and frowned deeply. I need to go. My mom will have dinner ready soon, and I can't be late. Galilee and Jordan stood back as they watched the girl go. She knows something. I have a feeling Denny D'Onofrio is the missing link. Galilee observed in a soft voice. And, I mean to find out exactly what she knows. Jordan sat down heavily in a chair in the clinic's waiting area. Cindy Murphy had been revived, although she was still unconscious. Galilee was trying to get something from the other 5 patients, but none were in any shape to provide clues as to their conditions. He hung his head in his hands, wishing for a moment that he'd taken a nap on the plane out here. He had a feeling it would be several days before he got a good night's sleep. With his head held down in his hands as it was, he could see a few inches beneath the display cabinet which dominated one wall of the room. His brow furrowed as he dropped to his knees on the ground to probe beneath the article of furniture and retrieve a small piece of white paper concealed there. Well, what do we have here? Jordan asked as he held the paper up to examine it. I bet Lee would be interested in you. Galilee paused a moment before raising her fist to knock loudly on the front door. She was on a mission. As each moment passed and she thought about those sick teenagers, her ire grew. How could Denny allow her friends to go through something like that when she had the power to stop it? Oh, hello. Can I help you, ma'am? A woman, who had to be Denny's mother, opened the door. Good evening, Mrs. D'Onofrio. My name is Galilee Gilchrist. I'm an investigator looking into the conditions of the 7 sick teenagers in Sugar Creek. I was hoping I might be able to speak with your daughter. Mrs. D'Onofrio cast an unhappy look back into the house before calling, Denise, honey, there's someone here who would like to talk to you. Denise emerged from the kitchen. Her face held a quick look of panic which she tried to hide the moment she saw Galilee. Why don't we talk outside, Miss Gilchrist? She suggested. Galilee nodded, her smile disappearing at the first sight of the teenager. Denise led her to the backyard and gestured to a picnic table on the deck. Thank you. Her voice was icy as she took the seat the girl had offered. Denny bit into her lower lip and started tracing the pattern of the wood which composed the table. You know something, Denny. You know why these kids are sick. You know what made them sick. Galilee observed in a voice as hard as concrete. The teenager swallowed hard and shook her head. I don't know what's causing their illnesses, Miss Gilchrist. I swear I don't. Look at me when I talk to you, Denise. If you want me to believe what you're saying, stop behaving like a liar. Lee's typical warmth and understanding had long ago been lost in a sea of fury. The very idea that this girl could call herself a friend of those sick kids and then hide the truth was enough to make Galilee irate. Denise slowly raised her eyes from the table. I really don't. He died, Denny. That first boy, the goth one, died this morning. Cindy came very close to dying today. If we don't find out what's wrong and fix it soon, your friends are going to be dead. Razor died? Denny asked in a small voice. There were tears gathering in her eyes now. You knew him? Lee pressed, not bothering to answer her question. Yes and no. I never met him, but I talked to him online. We all did. We? Me, and the others. The ones who are sick. We were all at Rick's after a JV football game. We were just playing around online, having fun. Rick took us to this weird website that talked about Satan worship and demons and stuff. It made me uncomfortable, but everybody else thought it was funny. He went into the site's chat room and started talking to this guy with the screen name Hellraiser. Razor told us that he helps build satanic churches. The guys started playing along with him, talking about how they wanted to start one here in Sugar Creek. I don't think they took him seriously. Galilee's face clouded at the girl's words. But, they should have, shouldn't they? He showed up here in Sugar Creek a couple weeks later, didn't he? Denny managed a shallow nod. Yes, ma'am. He waited for us outside of the school. He got Rick's picture off his homepage. Razor told us that we would have our first Black Mass that night at midnight. They actually went along with him. They thought it would be funny to take part in a Black Mass just for fun. I tried to tell them. Honest, I did. I tried to tell them that you don't mess with Satan just for fun. They didn't listen, and now. Denny dissolved into hysterical sobs. Lee's anger dissipated with Denny's first tears. SHH, now don't cry, Denny. We'll find a way to fix this, she soothed, patting the young woman's back. How? Denny hiccuped. Galilee paused. Did they tell you what they did at that Black Mass? Denny thought carefully. They said this weird stuff in Latin. Cindy said they cut off some chicken's head and drank his blood. They did some other stuff, but I don't remember what. That's okay. A light sparked in Lee's brown eyes. I think I know what to do. How much do you love me, Lee? Jordan greeted as Galilee tossed her coat on her hotel bed. She looked up to see her partner standing in the doorway connecting their rooms. Who said I loved you? She asked innocently. I'll admit, I'm a little fond of you, but love? I don't think so. You're cute, but certainly not my type. Jordan knew she was just teasing him, but he couldn't help the slight pang which hit his heart. Take a look at this. He entered the room and handed a piece of paper to Galilee. She looked at it for a moment before glancing up at Jordan quizzically. They're screen names. Hellraiser is patient 0. He has it tattooed on his, well you know. So, I'm thinking those other screen names are the sick kids. They met the guy online. Now, you love me, right? Galilee chuckled. You're a step behind me, lover boy. Pastor Dino Frio, Denny's father, finished laying the items Lee had requested out on the table in the waiting area. Her demands had been strange to say the least, and he was more than anxious to see what the woman had in mind. Galilee re-entered the room with her Bible in her hands and a confident smile on her face. She glanced over the faces of those seated in the waiting area, Jordan, her partner and still a non-believer, Pastor Dino Frio, the preacher in the local church, Dr. Onion, the presiding physician in the case, and Denny, a teenager only partially involved with the satanic dealings which had made her friends ill. Lee had asked them all to come and play a part in this, and she was constantly praying that it would work. What I am going to say to you is going to sound crazy, so I want your solemn promise not to interrupt me until I'm finished. Galilee began in an authoritative voice. Those present in the room nodded their agreement before she plunged ahead. I believe these teenagers are in their present conditions because of something called a pelicit. It exists in ancient Malaysian mythology. Simply put, it's a demon which causes illness, hallucination, and death whenever it can. I believe they were exposed to this demon and his wiles when they took part in a satanic ritual they were enacting for fun. They opened themselves up to Satan and his minions, allowing him to corrupt their physical bodies and even take the life of Razor. Pastor Dino Frio sat with a stunned expression on his face. Demonic possession. Is that what you're suggesting, Miss Gilchrist? Galilee nodded emphatically. I know with absolute certainty that Satan has played a part in this grievous event. I have every reason to believe that the pelicit is responsible for this. Dr. Onion frowned thoughtfully. If you're right, there's really nothing we can do for these kids medically. We'll just have to put it in God's hands. You're half right, Dr. Onion. We do have to put the situation in God's hands, but there is something we can do. At least, I think there is. Galilee added. These kids are still holding on, despite the demons trying to take their lives. I think they're at least partially aware of what's going on around them. I believe the infection was introduced through the blood of a chicken they drank during the Black Mass. So, my somewhat logical cure for this possession is, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. The blood of Christ. Pastor D'Onofrio interrupted, rising from his seat. That's a bit unorthodox, Miss Gilchrist. Jordan chuckled softly. He found it funny that the small-town pastor had just unknowingly called an ethnic Jew unorthodox. Galilee shot him a warning look before addressing the pastor. Unorthodox, yes, but I believe it will work. Alone, we don't have the power to cast out these demons, but through Christ we have the power to overcome all evil. Denny had never seen her father as excited as he was with that simple statement. Amen, Pastor D'Onofrio. Galilee returned with a smile. What do you say we go kick some demon tuckers? Pastor D'Onofrio poured a sacrament into the paper cup as Galilee directed, finally giving her a quizzical look. She knelt down beside Cindy Murphy's weary form. Cindy, honey, I know you can hear me. You can't speak to me, but you can hear me. You're sick because of something that you did. You participated in a satanic ritual, and now you have to renounce it. I know you can't talk, but not all prayers need to be out loud. Please, honey, we can give you this sacrament, and it might be enough to help you, but you need to pray with all your heart and soul. If you aren't already saved, and I'm guessing you're not, you might want to do that as well. Gently, she tipped the edge of the cup into the girl's mouth. Despite her sickened state, Cindy still managed to swallow the red liquid and collapse back against her pillows. Occasionally, Galilee could see the girl's lips quiver as she prayed. Pastor D'Onofrio stood back against the wall, staring at the scene with the wide eyes of one witnessing a miracle. Cindy's eyes squinted closed just as the alarm on her life support equipment beeped a warning. Cindy had flatlined. Dr. Runyon bolted into the room with a crash cart at the ready, followed closely by Jordan and a sobbing Denny. Galilee held her arm out to stop them. Give it time. She whispered, without the slightest surprise. It was as if she was almost expecting this. Pastor D'Onofrio's mouth went dry. Mark chapter 9, verses 26 and 27. Galilee nodded and glanced back at the man with a smile. And the Spirit cried, and rent him sore, and came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, and lifted him up, and he arose. Allow Christ to take Cindy by the hand, and she will rise again. As if in answer to Galilee's calm words, Cindy's body was unexpectedly overcome by a round of violent coughs as she drew air into her body. Jordan stared in amazement at the young woman as she pushed herself up in the bed and looked at Galilee with fear-filled eyes. Is it over? She rasped. Galilee rushed to the girl's side, taking her hand and squeezing it reassuringly. Yes, honey, this battle is. We won. Galilee double-clicked her mouse on the mailbox icon and sat back to read that day's correspondence. She was only slightly surprised to see a familiar screen name. She highlighted the email's subject and clicked again. Dear Miss Gilchrist. I got your email address from my dad, I hope that's all right. I just wanted to thank you for what you did. My friends owe you a lot. I know you said you didn't do anything, that Jesus did it all, but I still think he used you. You're in my prayers, now. The others, too. We've started a prayer group at the high school. It's just the 7 of us right now, but I'm hoping to get the word out. Did you say your parents were missionaries? I've been giving that some thought as a career choice. If I'm not bothering you, could you tell me about it? Thanks a lot. Sorry if I'm annoying you. God bless. See you later. Denny. Galilee paused before clicking the reply button. Thank you, God. My mother was right, your plans for me are so much more exciting than the ones I had for myself. I still can't believe you're letting me play a part in this. I'm truly humbled. And I can't wait until next time.